Wretched? Well, the Bible isn't full of crazy, outrageous, fantastic stories. It does have a fair share. Let's go back to the Old Testament. How's about that talking donkey? Huh? A Red Sea parting? Are you kidding me? And how's about all the times a small number of Jewish people were able to take over or defeat a much larger, better equipped army? Why do we have so many of what appear to be impossible stories in the Bible?
You've heard of the 300 Spartans, right? The legendary story of the Battle of Thermopylae when 300 Spartans stood against the entire Persian army. Though actually there were over 7,000 Greeks with the Spartans against over 100,000 Persians, but those are still impossible odds, which is why they all died. Still, the battle remains one of the most famous conflicts in history, with 2 films about the Spartans, one in 1962 and the other in 2007. Do not watch that movie. Even more amazing than the 300 Spartans were the 300 Israelites. Do you know that story? Centuries before Thermopylae, the 300 Israelites, led by Gideon, went up against an army of Midianites so large you couldn't count their camels. Gideon's 300 defeated 120,000 Midianites and did not lose a single man. They later killed another 15,000 and struck down both of Midian's kings. Yet world history is enamored with 300 Spartans who did not succeed, without even a glance at Gideon and his men. What gives?
What gives indeed? The world loves one story, says that the other one is just a fairy tale. 300 Israelites defeating over 100,000 in battle. That's impossible. And yet we are begging the question, why is it that we have true stories like that in the Bible when the world considers them too fantastic to believe?
Consider the word of God. Gideon started with 32,000 men, but God said, "The people with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hand, lest Israel boast over me, saying, 'My own hand has saved me.'" He reduced the number to 300 so everyone would know it is God who saves his people and strikes down his enemies. Psalm 10 says, "The wicked renounce the Lord and do not seek him. All their thoughts are, there is no God." So why would the world favor a story about 300 defeated pagans instead of 300 who succeeded by the hand of God? Because they hate God, when we understand the text.
2 reasons that the world reads the fantastic stories in the Bible, like the story of Gideon defeating the Midianites, and they scoff. Reason number 1 that story is in the Bible is to demonstrate God's power. These stories all point us heavenward. And the world doesn't like this because the stories of miracles, people rising from the dead, a man living inside of the belly of a giant fish for 3 days, all point us toward a God who is supernatural and can do whatever he wants, and he does not adhere to presumed laws. He controls the universe, and he can manipulate it any way that he wants. Miracles are something that liberal Protestant Christians have ripped out of the Bible, or just said, well, they're stories for our learning, but they didn't really happen. Why? Because liberal Protestants don't want a supernatural, omnipotent God who is controlling every single molecule in the universe, nor does the world want it, because you see, if the miracles can be demonstrated to be true, they would have to therefore confess, then God is true. And they're not about to do that. Second reason, did you catch it right at the end? The world calls these stories fairy tales because they hate God. And that is precisely why God put these stories in the Bible. They're real stories. They're true stories. But why did he do these things? He knew how sophisticated that we would become with our universities and internet. So why would he put in a story that makes the world go, this is no different than some sort of fairy tale about Cinderella, if you choose? Why did God do that? To confound the wisdom of the wise. God has chosen lowly things, because those are the things that demonstrate, if you believe them, you yourself are lowly. We must enter heaven like a little child. A little child will believe big stories, will believe fantastic stories because they so trust the adult that is telling them. Bingo with the stories in the Bible. They are there because people who are proud and self-righteous will just reject it. And guess what? God rejects the pride-filled and the self-righteous. He's the one that gets to do the final rejection. Those who read these stories and say, yes, they're true, Lord. I'm not going to let the world intimidate me. If they mock me, I don't care because I know that your word is true. And I won't let their scornful attitude at something so ridiculous as a man rising from the dead after being beaten and scourged deter me from loving you. So that raises a question. What do you do with these stories when you're witnessing to somebody? Do you ever talk about them? You should. They're in the Bible after all. They're true. Should you ever apologize for them? Absolutely not. We keep teaching them to our children because they are true, and God saves those who believe those stories. So which comes first? Their believing of the stories or the saving? This is a crucial question. The answer, God saves, then people believe the stories. It's just the way that it is. God so humbles a person, usually through the proclamation of His law, His high and holy standards, His character, nature, and goodness, that the person becomes humble. Then when they read through these stories, wait a second, Jesus was outside of the room and then He's inside of the room, and 5,000 loaves of bread, people fed from just a few loaves of bread. Yeah, I believe that. Which comes first when it comes to believing fantastic, miraculous stories in the Bible? It's not believing the stories, it's believing in the one who wrote them because He did them. In other words, to persuade somebody that these miraculous stories in the Bible are true, you just got to witness to them.